We asked Mohamedou to speak tonight because he actually came to the last meeting that we organised on Guantanamo very unexpectedly. We had organised a meeting with Andrew Worthington, an expert and a journalist who's with us tonight, to talk about Guantanamo. And because Andy was Facebook friends with Mohamedou Ould Salahi, Mohamedou just popped up to talk to us, which was really a delightful surprise, and it was lovely to have him at the meeting. And as a result, we decided to ask him to come this evening to talk, hopefully, to a larger number of Amnesty members, which is why we've tried to get this advertised throughout the country. One of the things we're going to do later on, myself and David, the secretary of the Lewes Group, is to show you some pictures, some photographs of what we've been doing in Lewes to campaign for the closure of Guantanamo, because we think it's the action that we organise during lockdown, a socially distanced action, is something that really could be quite easily replicated by other groups around the UK. We got a lot of attention, and it really was a very simple 1 hour action to take. And you could get hold of the outfits, if you like, the orange jumpsuits. They cost £12, you know, so they're not massively expensive. And it's just something, I'm just saying this now just because we're waiting for Mohamedou, and so probably I won't say it later on when we're talking, but we think that it would be really good to get more Amnesty groups involved this year in the actual on the streets raising awareness and campaigning, and we're very willing to share the materials that we've already got. We've got laminates of all the 40 men, for example, who are still detained on file. So we're very happy to share our resources and our experience of organising an action like this. And we got very good media attention locally as well. The other thing that the Lewes Amnesty Group has done is that using the details given on Andy Worthington's website, Close Guantanamo, we have also been encouraging people to write directly to detainees in Guantanamo. And today we've sent off 40 letters to each of the detainees as part of that project, but we're looking for people to join that. I know that Lise Rossi, the country coordinator for North America, will be talking later on. And after today's meeting, what we're going to do is we're going to put together a document, if you like, just explaining points that have come up this evening and explaining different ways in which you can contact us to get involved as a local group in campaigning as well. Okay, I'm just taking up, there's some time there. Have we got Mohamedou, has he arrived yet?
I don't think he has. Can I just take a moment to show you this? So this is how many days Guantanamo has been open today. 19 years is 6,941 days. And, you know, how long would it take you to think of 6,941 separate days and what you were doing on those days? This is a poster campaign, photo campaign that I've been running as part of Close Guantanamo for many years. So if anybody would like to join in, just go to Close Guantanamo website. It's closeguantanamo.org. And follow the links there. There are posters throughout the year. I generally do them every 100 days. And of course, now that we're looking at, hopefully, seeing the back of Donald Trump in 9 days' time, then, you know, Joe Biden is someone whose administration will be open to listening, at least to the extent, at least to a greater extent than Donald Trump. Donald Trump might well have just locked the door on listening to the outside world, and he certainly shut the door on Guantanamo. So, you know, this is a hopeful time, I think, for that.
Good. And Mohamedou has just joined us, I think.
Excellent.
Mohamedou, are you on the line? Just make sure you can.
Yes, yes, I am, and I'm so privileged, and I'm so happy.
Wonderful.
With you guys, and I can see the beautiful faces of Andy, you.
Hello, Mohamedou.
And Secretary Lewes.
Great. Well, we can now get started. So hello, good evening, and thank you to everyone on the line, more than 80 people, for joining this meeting arranged by the Lewes Amnesty Group. As Andy mentioned, today marks 19 years since the United States government opened its illegal detention center at Guantanamo Bay. And the purpose of us gathering today is really to move forward the campaign to get this disastrous violation of rights, values, and lives at Guantanamo Bay shut forever. I'm Hugh Sandeman. I'm chair of the Kingston Amnesty Group in Southwest London. Welcome to those Kingston members on the line too. And I'm currently, as someone mentioned, also a board member of AIUK. And I'm delighted to welcome our two speakers who've both been in different ways witnesses all the way through to the crimes of Guantanamo Bay. And they'll retell the story to reinforce our determination to campaign for an end to this outrage. Mohamedou Salahi was imprisoned without trial, tortured, held in solitary confinement for 14 years in Guantanamo Bay. And the testimony he's given publicly since regaining his life, or some of his life since 2016, has, as I think you'll see tonight, been really remarkable. It's also great that Andy Worthington is here, journalist, expert on Guantanamo, dedicated campaigner against it. And Andrew will in a moment introduce Mohamedou. After Mohamedou's talk, we'll wrap up with comments from 2 or 3 Amnesty veterans of the campaign in the UK against Guantanamo Bay. Sarah Birch and David Burke from the Lewes Group will talk about the group's long campaign to free prisoners from Guantanamo and to have the place shut down. And Lise Rossi, North American coordinator for AIUK, will then present a new Amnesty report out today called Decision Time on Guantanamo. Lise will also give us all a letter to spread among friends, sign, and send back to her for delivery via Amnesty in the US. So like all Amnesty meetings, we'll listen, talk, and then we'll make sure that we at least pledge to take an action. So once again, thanks so much for joining from all around the country. And Andy, over to you to introduce Mohamedou.
Thank you, Hugh. Well, you know, basically, here we are in the presence of Mohamedou, a former prisoner, and I know that everyone will very much want to hear what Mohamedou has to say. So I will say that Mohamedou is one of the men whose story I got to know when I was researching the prison at Guantanamo Bay in 2006, which I did by piecing together stories of the prisoners from accounts that had been made available under duress by the US government. And some of these were transcripts in which the voices of the prisoners came across, and you got a sense of their personalities in some cases. And Mohamedou was certainly one of those people. He talked about how when his home government in Mauritania handed him over to the United States, they handed him over like a candy bar. It was an extraordinary facility with words that I think, you know, I hope we've all learned from Mohamedou since, that we've had the privilege of reading his extraordinary book, which, as well as exposing the horrors of what the United States has been up to, also contains this extraordinary warmth and humor and humanity on Mohamedou's part. So we'll have you know, questions and discussions afterwards, but really for now, I'd very much like to hand it over to Mohamedou, and welcome, Mohamedou.
Thank you so much. And I'm really so privileged to speak to you tonight and to participate in this discussion. And I'm here to learn more than anything, and to show support and to show love for you. And we appreciate your work. We heard about the work of Amnesty. Maybe without people like and organizations like the Amnesty International, I would not be talking to you today. I would be forgotten in somewhere in the world with no voice, and as it happened to so many people throughout history. We have a tradition in Mauritania of telling stories, and I'm just will make my introduction with a very small true story that happened to me when I was in second or third grade. It was like about 2:30 p.m. and it was like a very hot day, even with Mauritanian standards, the standards of Africa. And I went to my class, but I had no shoes. And my very small feet kept burning, and I kept dashing from one structure to the next to cool down my feet. And because I want to catch my class, our neighbor, who was somewhat a rich woman, called me and said, "Child, why are you going to school without shoes?" Little did she know that my family had no money to buy me shoes. We had camels, and the camels, most of them died because of the drought. And I was ashamed to tell the woman that my family was so poor. And I kept listening to her lecture, and my feet still burning. And then she told me to go back and Nana's and get my shoes. And I went back just to show her that I'm going to collect my shoes. But I did not go back to my shoes. I went and took another path where I wouldn't find this woman. And forward about 17 years, I came back to Mauritania to visit my mother. And my government arrested me and took away my passport. And when the 9/11 happened, I was kidnapped in a special operation that was orchestrated by Canadian, American, and especially Mauritanian and Jordanian to kidnap me and take me to Jordan in a secret prison. And from there, I was taken to Afghanistan, and from Afghanistan, more than 14 years only in Guantanamo Bay, and between Guantanamo Bay and other places, almost 20 years of my life I spent between prisons of different countries. This was not the rule of law. This was complete contempt to the rule of law. And the biggest crime, ladies and gentlemen, that I've committed was having been born in Africa, having been born in a place where there is no law, and bigger countries that are supposed to protect the vulnerable and promote human rights are doing this. Forward almost 40 years, that very little child uh, has a very big movie dedicated to his life. Very big movie with very famous actors, the like of Jodie Foster, and yet Benedict Cumberbatch. I'm sure my UK audience would be very proud to hear also that Kevin McDonald is helming this project. This is not to tell the story of me. This is the story of every child from a very poor country who had no privileged life, who lived very simple life, and were punished for something they didn't do, but for who they are. And with that, I'm passing the mic to you guys because I don't want to talk too much. I want to listen mostly and to hear if you have any comments or any question. And thank you again for having me.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much indeed, Mohamedou, especially for your offer of opening this up to our audience. what I suggest to, as we have a lot of people on the line, is if you'd like to post in the chat that you want to ask a question, I'll then call on you to unmute and ask the question. And that way we will have I hope, a number of contributions from you, and we'll be able to ask Mohamedou about all aspects of his extraordinary experience. So just go to the chat and put in your name and say question, or just write your name there and I'll ask you to join. Alex, please unmute and ask a question. Alex M.
Thank you so much, Hugh. My name is Alex Mtobi. I live in Polegate in East Sussex. And thanks for having accepted my invitation, my request to be part of this meeting. So the question I have is, although you've spoken for just a few minutes, Mohammed, it seems to be a very touching story that you were kidnapped. So could I just ask as to what led them, whether it was half the evidence or whatever it was, what is it that led them to come and kidnap you? What suspicion, what was the reason that was given to you or to anybody for taking you to Afghanistan and then to Guantanamo? Thank you.
Hugh, may I answer? Or
Please go right ahead and answer. Yeah.
Thank you, Alex. This is a very good question indeed, and I think I should always address it. Because you know why, Alex? Because everyone say, okay, people don't just waste money and without reason. Actually, it took me very, very long and many years to figure out why I was kidnapped. And the reason was the following. When I was in Germany working, my cousin, who was a very close ally and friend of the late Osama bin Laden, called me. And he called me using the satellite phone of Osama bin Laden that was tapped by the CIA and NSA. I don't know. They just were listening to them. And I was oblivious that I don't ask someone what the phone you are using to call me, for instance. That's not one of the questions I would ask you if you call me. And so this cousin, he wanted something from me. His father was sick, and he asked me to help him send some money to his father in Mauritania. My cousin was living in Sudan. So, and that's it. So I was tagged. And then I went to Canada, and then the mosque I used to pray in, a guy from that who used also to attend that mosque was trying, plotting to hurt people in the United States. His name is Ahmed Rassam. I don't know Ahmed Rassam. I never met him. I never heard of his name. But they say, look at this guy. He had this phone call, and he is going to the same mosque as this guy who was trying to hurt us. Add to that when I was very young, I visited Afghanistan, and stayed there like very short time. So this all is okay. I have no problem with the United States or the UK, for that matter, governments to think that I'm a bad person. It's fine with me. But what is not fine with me is kidnapping me and torturing me and make me confess, make false confession under torture with things that I know I didn't do. That turned out to be not true. After 20 years of thorough investigation, not one single shred of evidence, because of the simple reason I hadn't done anything to anyone. And thank you again.
One question that Sarah's asked that would be interesting to hear from you, Mohamedou, and also from Andy, is what the current political situation is in respect of the potential for movement on the closure of Guantanamo Bay? Do things look possibly better than they have before or not? Mohamedou, why don't you take that one first, and then we'll hear Andy's view.
Hugh, we have to be positive. You know, if I wasn't positive, I would have died of depression. You know, we have to be positive. I mean, we can only get better after Trump. You know, like I was like, when is he going to blow up, like, or to unleash, like, weapon of mass destruction, the atomic bomb? We just need to hold out 1 week, a little bit more than 1 week. And then we said, oh, out of the woods. Things can only get better. And we hope that with the experience of Mr. President-elect Biden, who knows, the ins and outs, and who worked like 8 years along Obama, like thinking about closing down. And we have to be positive. This is a positive climate.
Great. Could you mute? Could everybody mute, please? Who's not speaking? That's why we're getting feedback. Philippa, if you could hit your mute button, that would be great. And Andy, why don't you give your comment on the political situation and the prospects for hope on this extraordinary long saga?
Yeah, well, I very much like Mohamedou's point of view that things can only get better after 4 years of Donald Trump, which has been awful. The men still held there have been entombed. So let's look to what we can expect from Joe Biden. Joe Biden has 40 men in Guantanamo. 6 of those men have been approved for release. 5 of them under President Obama through high-level government review processes. And for one reason or another, they weren't freed while Obama was in office. The 6th man has just been approved for release by a parole-type process that Obama set up called the Periodic Review Boards. And that notification came through just a few weeks ago. That's the only example of any prisoner being approved for release under Donald Trump. So President-to-be Joe Biden, as we now know, has complete control of the Congress. He has the Senate, he has the House. It's important to remember in American politics that you can be the president and not have control of Congress. Obama had control of Congress for 2 years. For his last 6 years, he didn't. It makes it very difficult to do anything. So Biden can do things that are important. And some of that would involve legislation. So at the moment, because of a legacy of 10 years of legislation by the Republicans, no prisoner is allowed to leave Guantanamo to the US mainland for
Andy, I think you hit mute.
Illegal under US law for them to be moved to the US mainland to have urgent medical treatment. That's something that could be dealt with. In a bigger picture way, what could be dealt with is that trials could be held for people on the United States mainland rather than the broken military commission system at Guantanamo. But Joe Biden doesn't need anyone's approval for anything to start the process of releasing the men that are already approved for release. He can do that by appointing someone within his administration to actually deal with it. This was a role that existed under Obama, the envoy for Guantanamo closure, who facilitated discussions with countries for resettling prisoners and for monitoring their welfare and their lives afterwards. Trump shut that down. So he could do that day one. And I think those of us who are campaigning, need to work on exerting this kind of pressure. But I also think it's very important for us to remember that after 19 years, there's really no longer any excuse on the part of the United States to be saying that people have to continue to be held because they pose some kind of threat when there is no intention of putting them on trial. If the United States is going to charge people in Guantanamo and put them on trial, fine. Everybody else, they need to be released. And what's been happening for far too many years now is that under Obama, he had a review process that said, we've got a whole load of guys here that we think are dangerous, but we haven't really got the evidence to put them on trial. And then he set up this parole style review, and that keeps grinding on, suggesting that the people held still have bad attitudes towards the United States, that they haven't put forward a good plan for what they're going to do with their lives. This is nearly 20 years. If these men had been charged or tried with any kind of crime, they would probably already have been released. It's absolutely unforgivable that people are held in what is still a limbo where the law does not apply. And, you know, there are people whose stories we should all look into if we're interested in this. Men like Saifullah Paraka, who is the oldest prisoner in Guantanamo, a Pakistani businessman who is a kind of father figure to the prisoners, well respected by the staff, but at the intelligence level is still regarded as some kind of threat because, you know, before he was captured, he had a couple of meetings with Osama bin Laden in Pakistan. The man is not an Al-Qaeda member or a terrorist threat. There are other men in Guantanamo who were mere foot soldiers in Afghanistan who are still held for one reason alone. They have had a bad attitude while they have been in Guantanamo. That's it.
Yeah,
they are
Andy,
regarded as a security threat because they have responded over the years rather badly to the fact that they've been held in such abominable and lawless conditions. It's unforgivable.
It is.
So,
Andy, we've got a
I hope
couple
that
of
wasn't
questions.
too long-winded an answer.
We've got a couple of questions. Why don't we have a question from Sukh Singh, if you unmute and ask your question.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
I was just wondering, obviously they would have tortured and got a fake confession out of Mohamedou. And because I'm a bit new to the story, I've only learned about it recently. So how would he have gotten out, like gained his freedom after giving a fake confession? Because that would be an interesting story, wouldn't it?
Mohamedou, did you hear that?
I did hear it. Who did ask the question?
Sukh Singh asked the question.
Thank you, Sukh Singh, for your beautiful question.
Thank you.
So I was not easily coerced in a confession. So actually, it took me. I was kidnapped on November 28th of 2001, and I made the confession end of 2003. More than 2 years, about 2 years of torture. But the torture, I took everything in. But when they told me they're going to kidnap my mother, and when they took me to in the boat rides, and I said, that's it. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm broke, and I'm broken. I mean, and I'm going to tell them everything they want to hear. And I just made up a story because why I made up the story, because the First Sergeant Charlie, who was one of my interrogators, I told him, I didn't do this. He said, maybe you didn't do 9/11. Maybe you didn't do the plot. Maybe you wanted to take down the CN Tower. I was like, what's the CN Tower? Then I did not hear what the CN Tower was. And then when I was really beaten badly, you know, like sleep deprivation, beating, forced to drink salt water, and threat of to kidnap and rape my mother, I said, yes, I want to blow up CN Tower. And he told me I need to write this as a confession. I said, no problem. And he brought me pen and paper, and I wrote the confession. Ironically, this confession, Andy, if you listen, this confession was my way out, because now they had to deal with it. That's it. I hit the bottom, and they had to now take me now to trial, and I was the first detainee to be designated for capital punishment. When they studied the confession, they came back, they said, this is BS. This could not have happened. This information is wrong. And then they said they had to take me to polygraph. And when they took me to polygraph, I said, I cannot lie on a polygraph because I'm an engineer. I understand this. I have to tell you, I did not anything against you, nothing. And that's what I will say on a polygraph. They said, okay. And I said it, and I passed the polygraph not once, twice. And then my case died completely, dead. But I was not allowed to go home. Never. Two things happened. I will not be taken to court, and then I will not go home. It took like so many years, like more than 13 years between my confession and my release. Release, even though the court released me, but they refused also to release me. And I was released by this parole board. What is called again? PRB, Periodic Review Board. Periodic Review Board, the government deciding whether to release you or not. No court, no law, nothing. Just the US government said, you are a threat, you are not a threat. And this is so humiliating after so many years. And I cannot put it better than Andy. And thank you again.
Thanks. There's a question from Klara Suleiman. Would you like to put the question?
So my question was just like, what are some things that could be done in order to pressure Biden? Because I know that with Democrats, sometimes in the US, they can be quite stubborn into like going through with policies. So it's like, I just wanted to know, like, what are some things that could be done in order to pressure him into actually closing Guantanamo Bay?
Mohamedou and Andy, do you both want to take a crack at that?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you, Andy.
Can anyone hear me?
Yes.
Ah, okay. I wrote in the chat that from a British point of view, you know, we can support things that are happening stateside, but actually what would be interesting now would be to try and approach MPs who are interested in these issues and to get them involved. There used to be an all-party parliamentary group on Guantanamo that was set up after
I think we might have lost Andy temporarily there. Let's give him a second to see if we can get him back. Mohamedou, do you want to tell us what you think we could do while Andy's reaching for bandwidth?
So, Klara, thank you so much for this beautiful question. And I think that's what we should be talking about.
Hi guys, I'm back. Sorry about that.
Okay, well, Andy, why don't you finish and then Mohamedou will contribute to the question as well. If you turn off your TV, your video, it'll be sparing of your bandwidth. No, Andy's gone again. I think we're under attack from someone. Mohamedou, do you want to take up that question again as to what we can do?
Yes, again, I say thank you so much, Klara, for this question. And that was what we should be talking about. I'm a very practical person. I would say 2 or 3 things. The first thing, we support Amnesty International. We support this group because they have the tools and they have the experience and they know exactly how to go about this. And the second thing, we help the survivor of torture, the survivor of Guantanamo Bay, by also making pressure because UK country. And I am a person who was invited times and wanted to talk to you in the UK, and I was being denied entry as a threat to the United Kingdom. And I can tell you, this is cannot be much farther from the truth. I love UK people. They supported me. They stood by me. I hate violence. I hate violent people. And I'm a very big believer in coexistence and in people of different culture living together. And this is like the UK should not be an accolade or should not be just listening to any US crazy politician telling them jump and they would say how high. UK is bigger than that. UK should say, yes, Mohammed, you can come to us, you can speak to your brothers and sisters, and you can Guantanamo Bay. And the first thing, we support amnesty in our local amnesty because they know exactly what to do. They have campaigner, they know the game, they are oiled machines. And thank you again.
Great, thanks. There's an interesting question from A. Davis. Sorry, I don't know the full name. Would you like to put your question?
Yeah. I'd just be really interested to hear what or who stood out to you, or what stood out to you that helped you through the dark days during your time imprisoned.
What's your name again?
It's
Please?
Anne-Marie. It's Anne-Marie.
Thank you, Amre, for the question. I mean, Amre, a lot of people ask me this question, but I don't know exactly. But I can tell you that I am very curious person. I like to understand things. I always ask why they pick up on me, why they took me, and then I start like to make friends in prison. And I'm also like, I believe in a bigger power. We say in Mauritania, we say Allah. In Britain, some people say God, some people say the universe. It doesn't matter. I think we all refer to the same thing. And I always like pray and meditate. And most of all, I don't hate anyone. I try not to hate anyone. I just try to understand why things are done. Why me? Why me? Why not someone else? Because our time on earth is very short, and we will live like without figuring out everything. And that helped me a lot. And I kept like studying the Western history and the American history and why Americans the way they are, and etc. etc. I just kept my mind occupied with these things, learning, studying.
Oh, thank you very much, and I do hope that you do manage to come to the UK. We'd be very privileged if that was able to happen, and would like it to happen very much.
Great. We have time for just one more question, I think. If anyone hasn't asked a question who'd like to, if you could pop it in the chat, just say who you are and we'll know you want to ask a question. Good. Dominique. Dominique, you have a question.
I do. Hi. So 6 people are approved for release, and I just wonder what we know about the other 34, or is it 35?
Hello, Dominique.
Hello.
The other 35, there are 9 men who are charged or have been gone through the trial process at Guantanamo. So all the other prisoners are this category that I was discussing before, that the media have dubbed them accurately the forever prisoners. They're men like Mohamedou was if he was released. They're men who are regarded as too dangerous to release, but insufficient evidence exists to put them on trial. what this means is that the evidence against them is fundamentally unreliable, because if you or I were to be put on trial in a court where the evidence was somehow dubious, then we would have to presume that we would end up not being prosecuted because the evidence is not trustworthy. This is the problem, and and I think that after nearly 20 years, it really is very important for us to now start putting pressure on the United States to say you cannot endlessly hold people without justifying why you're doing it on some nebulous basis that people are dangerous. It really is not acceptable. And it is genuinely, I can point you to the case of a man called Khalid Qasim. If you look him up, I've written about him. He's one of the people in Guantanamo who's produced some amazing artwork. He's somebody who is a cell block leader, so he tries to look after the welfare of his fellow prisoners. He has also had an attitude problem over the years with the United States authorities. They regard him as somebody that they don't think it's trustworthy for him to be released. This is an appalling situation. How can people continue to be imprisoned because of the way that they have responded to the way that they've been treated since they were in prison? It's not about what they did before they were in prison. I'm very much hoping that pressure will be on Joe Biden to release these men approved for release, but also that following on from that very swiftly, there will be pressure on saying, but you're also holding a lot of other people who do not constitute any kind of threat to you and need to be released, because at the very least, what we need to do is to halve the population that's at Guantanamo. We need to be chipping away at it to get to the point where we're going to end up with a small number of people who are allegedly responsible for serious crimes and work out how they can get prosecuted, because that's not even working at the moment. But until we get to that point, the blunt truth is that the United States is holding people that it hasn't got a case against and that really don't constitute a threat, and is claiming that that's somehow acceptable.
Thanks, Andy. I want to turn this over in a second to the Lewes Amnesty Group to talk about actions, but there's one last question for you, Mohamedou, that I really think should be asked from Maria. Maria, if you could ask your question, please.
Yes, hello, can you hear me? Good, okay, hello. Hi, Mohamedou. Thank you so much for your brilliance and your radiance and your giving us hope. My question is perhaps a bit slanted towards the hopelessness. I'm wondering what your thoughts are about the possibility of eradicating torture. I mean, we're talking about policy measures, but torture has such a long history, and we have seen societies fall into it again and again and again. I wonder what your thoughts are about the innate nature of the tendency or the impulse to torture.
Hugh, may I?
Please, yes.
So, Maria, much love. I just want to give a shout out to Maria. Maria is a professor in New York, and she is doing great scholar writing to educate like cops and interrogators to interrogate the suspect without using torture and violating human rights. So she is like one of the biggest fan of her. And so, like Maria, I don't know, but we are a human being, and I think we will always do mistakes. But after 9/11, after the horrific events of 9/11, it seems like the Western world, that is the free world, that is supposed to abolish torture. For some reason, they inspired to help torture, or at least to turn a blind eye in best of cases. And that's very alarming. And the discussion in the United States after 9/11 was whether torture is productive or not. And that's so horrific to talk about. Because my answer to this, in Africa, we have, for instance, problem that family don't have enough food. Why don't they kill half of the family? Because that will solve the problem of food. But it's a taboo to talk about that. It's because it's just inhumane to kill a human being, and it's inhumane to torture people, whether torture produce or not. We must not torture people. We should pass that. And I'm really hopeful, since we are talking to a youth audience, them take a leading role to say no to torture, and not like passing intelligence under the table to other countries to use them to torture people. And again, cannot emphasize the importance of Maria. And thank you so much, Maria, infinitely.
Thank you for the question and the answer. We are running short of time. Sarah, could you take over at this point and tell us a little bit about the actions that the Lewes Amnesty Group have pursued to help prepare our minds for what we should be doing next?
Hi, yes, thank you, Hugh. Just to say, I think David, our secretary, is going to start off actually, but before I pass to David, just very quickly to say, taking up on Andy's point from earlier on, because I was involved with the Save Shaka Amar campaign, and I think what would be really good would be for us to have an all-party parliamentary group of MPs back in Parliament, sort of pushing for the closure of Guantanamo. And I think that we've got over 300 amnesty groups in the country, and I think that we could all send the report to our local MPs. We could all be out on the streets demonstrating. We could get our MPs involved. But I'm going to pass you over to David, then he'll pass you back to me, because we've got a few photos to show you, but we'll be quick because we've got other things to discuss. Pass you to David.
Okay. I'm going to, what am I going to do? I'll just start talking and see if can you all see me here? Well, I tell you what, whether you can see me or not, I'm going to share my screen. That's a good thing to do. Can everyone see my screen? Okay, good. Am I still, can you hear my voice? Oh yeah, okay. You're all right. There we go. So yeah, just a little bit about a campaign that we started last year. It's called American Crisis, which at one point I was worried was too alarmist, but this week seems pretty spot on. It's named after a pamphlet by this man, Thomas Paine, who was one of the unsung heroes of the American Revolution, one of the more radical of the country's founders, and he has connections to Lewis, and that's why we're dragging him into this. He wrote this. He wrote these words. These are the times that try men's souls. He also wrote something called Common Sense. And what we did was, this was in sort of autumn of last year, Amnesty issued a report, a kind of school report on America's human rights policy to submit to the United Nations. And that was 20 pages of sort of densely argued legal stuff. So we condensed that down to a sort of more readable pamphlet that we then started handing around Lewis. We've sent that to thousands of people in Lewis and a fair number of people in the United States. And it's all in the language of Tom Paine, and it just boils down what Amnesty was saying about America, and basically asking, coming down to this question at the bottom, which is, you can't see here, but let's see. Well, anyway, the question is, what happened? A country founded on human rights. what's going on? And of course, that question has become more important. This came about because the Lewes Amnesty Group, we had a number of people who were concerned about American issues. I got into it because I was concerned about the family separation thing. Sarah obviously was concerned about Guantanamo Bay. We have someone who cared very deeply about the death penalty, police brutality, and we put all these together. And now I'm going to quickly just show you. So this is our website, and there's Mohamedou. And so that's advertising tonight's event. We've also been sending Christmas cards to the families who have been separated and held in what are called residential facilities in Texas and Pennsylvania. This is work we've done. This year's Right for Rights, we concentrated on the death penalty that the Trump administration seems so keen to make as much use of as it can in its last month. And there's our Right for Rights. This is one thing we did was we sent that leaflet I showed you to all the kind of high schools in the area around these residential centers where families have been held. We've targeted the schools there, the history teachers, the American studies teachers, and we've encouraged them to take a look at live video that we have for them about human rights in America as it was presented to the United Nations, and that includes what Amnesty sent. And this was a talk. This was a great talk we had by a guy, an attorney from the United States, from New York, whose brother had been killed by police while in police custody, and he advises the city of New York on police brutality and so forth. So that's him. That's Ryan Boodoo. And then this summer, we did this live event that Sarah alluded to, and this was in the Lewes shopping precinct. But we got a very good turnout for that. And I'm now going to hand you sort of back to Sarah, and she can tell you more about that.
Oh, hello. Yeah. Do you want to go back to that picture?
I'll stop. Oh, I will share my screen though, because
yeah, I'm going to speak. People can hear me. Can people hear me? Yeah. So just go back to the Guantanamo pictures, really. Just to say, yeah. I mean, we're going all over the place now.
Okay, here we are.
Yeah, basically what we did is we got laminates. We made laminates of all the 40 men who are still detained in Guantanamo, and we arranged a socially distanced walk through the main town centre of Lewes, and we handed out leaflets explaining what we were campaigning about, and who could be written to at that point to protest. Now we had members coming from Tunbridge Wells, from Brighton, from Kingston Group. We had other Amnesty members coming. There's all of us. We wrote a press release that got a lot of publicity in the local press, and we joined forces with other local groups as well. And it was a very moving and a very simple. What we found is that it was a very simple yet moving event, and what I wanted to say to the groups here tonight was it really is something that could easily be replicated by other groups over these coming months across the UK. Maybe MPs could be asked to join you, the report could be sent out, but rather than reinventing the wheel, us here in Lewes, if you email us, and we're going to send an email out to everyone who's here today, we can explain to you how we did it. Obviously you can do it your own way, but we can explain. We're happy to share resources with you. The other thing I wanted to say is that we've also been writing to all 40 men in Guantanamo. I don't know if you've got the photograph, David, of the letter writing project. Just to say today, yeah, today we sent letters to every prisoner in Guantanamo, and we are looking we are looking for more volunteers to write to people in Guantanamo. So that's all I'm going to say now, because I know we haven't got much time left, but we will send an email out to everybody who's come tonight, because we'll have your email addresses with some follow-up advice from Lewes Amnesty Group and how you can join in or do what we're doing. But we're going to pass you over to Lise now, who's the coordinator for North America. I don't know how much time we've got left, Hugh.
Yeah, Lise, we're heading towards injury time, but we're still okay. So Lise, over to you.
Okay. Well, I circulated the report today, which I received, which was embargoed until this morning, 62 pages with the history of Guantanamo. And the action, well, they think we should focus on Joe Biden and then on Congress, Department of Justice, and then Department of Defense. But the action I've been sending to the groups, I've been sending to 35 groups at the moment who are on my list interested in this theme. It's to write to Joe Biden. I mean, there's an ambiguous word because they talk about a petition, which is not possible under COVID situation. You cannot do. So I'm asking everybody, and some groups have asked me what they should do. Just write letters, sign them, and send them to me. And I've been asked by Amnesty US to send everything. They will give all the letters to Joe Biden or his administration 2 months after his presidency starts. So I'm aiming to collect everything by the end of February and then send everything over to Washington. I just wanted to say, for people who didn't get any details, write to me and I'll put in the chat my email so you can write to me. But otherwise, you write to Joe Biden and basically you ask to issue immediately an executive order to close Guantanamo. You commit to the full resolution of each detainee in accordance with international law. You ensure that every proceeding takes into account the length of the imprisonment and torture and disappearance and everything. And you recognize officially that torture is prohibited by international law. That's the main points. But otherwise, you just write with your own words. I think that's it.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Lise. So we have our homework.
Yes.
Earlier, it was suggested, it's a good one, that all of us send the report that came out today, which you can find on the amnesty.org website, to our MPs, and then write Lisa's letter, and we send it to you, Lisa. Is that correct?
I'm just going to put my address
in the chat.
Yes, if that's okay.
Of course it's all right. It's essential.
Whoops. Here. I think that's clear, yeah?
Not seeing it yet.
Oops.
And yeah, here we are. And Bev from Croydon has just made the useful suggestion that actually, Lise, if you could write, it's already in the email you sent around to those of us trying to put this event together. If you could write the issues that need to be addressed down and ask Sarah and David to send those to everyone on this call, that would be great, because otherwise it's easy to lose focus.
So I'll write to Sarah, is that right? Sarah.
Yeah, and then Sarah will be emailing everybody on this call.
That's right. We were planning to send a sort of email after the call.
Okay,
the next couple of days.
No problem.
Okay, that brings us to the end of this meeting. But before we adjourn, I wonder if we could leave a last word to both Andy and to Mohamedou to close off the proceedings and hopefully encourage us for however long we need to take action to get this outrage off the face of the earth. So Andy, why don't you go first and then Mohamedou as the final comment.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you're leaving with Mohamedou because he has such an inspiring way. I think we need to follow up on approaching MPs. It's interesting to me that there were 3 particular MPs who were very active around the time of the release of Shaka Arma, and 2 of them then got sidetracked into being the leader and the shadow chancellor of the Labour Party, and that's Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell, who have championed the underdog throughout their political careers. The 3rd MP who was always there and always is Caroline Lucas. So I think we've already got the possibility of getting an all-party parliamentary group. If there are people here who know of anyone in the Lib Dems who's active these days, then we've got somewhere to go. And I think the Biden administration will be vulnerable to pressure from trusted allies. This is what my American friends tell me.
Excellent, thank you very much. And Mohamedou, over to you. Waiting for Mohamedou to come on air. I don't see a panoramic view. So.
I think you can hear me.
Oh yeah.
Wonderful.
I would like to second my brother, Andy. MPs are the way to go because they have the political power and they have the ears of the most trusted ally. Remember that the United Kingdom is the most important ally to the United States. Show us in that you help us close this place. I know I'm so happy to have this kind of campaigns, and I know people in Guantanamo Bay knowing that, knowing them and knowing that place, that they will be so happy just to hear about this kind of campaigns. It will keep them alive. Thank you very much, and God bless you.
Thank you so much, Mohamedou. Can we give a round of Zoom applause to Mohamedou, to Andy, to the Lewes Group? Thank you very much indeed. Thank you so much. Stay well, everybody. Lovely to see you all. Good night and happy actions in the weeks ahead. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.